You're holding your phone right now, waiting. The silence has settled in for days now. Those people who never left you in peace, who always had a critique, a dig, a comment that stung, are quiet. And this silence is frightening you more than any cruel message ever could. You started wondering if they finally forgot you, if you've become invisible, if all that pain you carried for years was for nothing. But I need to tell you what's truly happening behind this veil of quiet, because the truth is far greater than you imagine. They aren't quiet because they abandoned you. They are in a state of spiritual shock. And in the next few minutes, I'll explain exactly what triggered this silence, what's happening in their world right now, and why this moment, especially with the energy of March 20th, is a watershed in your story. Stay with me until the end, because there's a specific part of this message that will completely change how you see everything that happened to you. Let's start with the question you probably haven't dared to ask aloud. Why did people who should have loved you make a point of hurting you repeatedly? I'm not talking about strangers. I'm talking about family, about people who knew your name before you learned to speak, who were there in your childhood, who should have been your safe harbor. I'm talking about that relative who always found a way to diminish your achievement with a phrase. The person who spent hundreds on gifts for everyone at the family gathering and gave you something symbolic, almost like a veiled message of how much you were worth to them. The group that changed the subject in 30 seconds when you shared good news. You learned to smile and nod. You learned to swallow it. You learned to doubt your own perception because everyone around acted like it was normal, like you were exaggerating, like the pain you felt was your invention. But it wasn't an invention. And here is the first point that needs to be etched in your mind. When a spiritually protected person is attacked repeatedly, each attack leaves a trace. Not in the physical world, but in the spiritual world, there is a record of every intention, every word launched to hurt, every calculated exclusion. The Bible calls this harvest. Science calls it attention. You need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Emic consequence and the spiritual traditions of the entire world agree on one point. No one wounds an anointed soul and walks away unscathed forever. Forever is the key word. Because for years, you likely watched these people prosper while hurting you. That is real. It happens. And there's a spiritual reason for it that most people never understand. And I will explain it to you now. There is a period theologians call preventive mercy. It's the time God gives for a person to repent voluntarily before the natural consequences of their actions begin to manifest. During this period, it seems the aggressor is doing well. It seems unfair. It seems heaven is asleep. But what's actually happening is that each ignored chance, each moment they could have changed and chose not to, each prayer you sent up asking for justice, all of it was being accumulated. And when this period expires, and it always expires, the curtain falls. The silence you're hearing now isn't indifference. It's the sound of sacred terror taking hold of souls that are finally, involuntarily, being forced to see the truth about what they did. Let me tell you what's happening in their world right now. They are having dreams. Not ordinary dreams, dreams that leave marks. Dreams where they experience, from your perspective, each moment of exclusion. They wake at 3 in the morning with your face in mind and a weight in their chest they can't identify. They try to go back to sleep. They can't. They stare at the ceiling, and their mind automatically goes to memories they had buried. That family reunion where they made a joke about you and laughed. That time you needed support and they looked away. That holiday when you were visibly hurt and no one asked if you were okay. These memories are surfacing with a clarity they cannot control. And along with the memories comes a physical sensation, a tightness in the chest, an anxiety that arises from nowhere, a restlessness that doesn't let them rest, even when their outer life seems fine. This has a spiritual name: conviction. The Holy Spirit doesn't punish, He reveals. And when He reveals to a soul that has erred, the experience is uncomfortable in a way no distraction can relieve. But here's the detail that will surprise you. Some of them aren't connecting the dots consciously yet. They are feeling the weight without understanding the origin. And this creates a very specific pattern of behavior you might already be observing. They become quieter. The constant flow of critiques, digs, and aggressive messages decreases or stops. Not because they changed, but because something is working within them that doesn't let them be comfortable as before. The inner voice they silenced for years is getting louder. And when you can no longer silence your own conscience, you stop making noise outside. Now I need to talk about something that will make even more sense to you if you've been in this situation a long time. Have you noticed that shortly after they cut you off, excluded you, or intensified attacks against you, something started going wrong in their lives? I'm not asking this to create a narrative of revenge. I'm asking because it's a real pattern, documented both in spiritual wisdom and studies on dysfunctional family dynamics. When a family or group uses a person as a scapegoat, the one who receives the blame, contempt, the role of the problem, this system works like a pressure valve. All the internal tension of the group is directed toward that person. They carry the collective weight. When the scapegoat leaves, when you refuse to continue in that role, when you establish boundaries, when you step away, the pressure that was directed outward returns inside the system. And then the conflict that was being suppressed begins to emerge among themselves. Relationships that seemed solid start to crack. Tensions you were there to absorb now have nowhere to go. This isn't mysticism, it's group dynamics, it's family psychology. And it's also what Scripture describes when it says that whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Now we're arriving at the most important part of this message. The part I promised would change your perspective. You are on March 20th. This isn't a random day on the spiritual calendar. The March equinox marks one of 2 moments in the year when light and darkness are in perfect balance before light begins to prevail. In practically all spiritual traditions of the world, from Native American traditions to Hebraic traditions, through folk Catholicism and African diaspora practices, the March equinox is recognized as a portal of transition, turning, renewal. For the chosen ones, those marked for a greater purpose who have faced disproportionate opposition from early on, this moment has a specific meaning. It's the moment when the cycle that has been operating in shadows begins to become visible in the light of day. Everything done in darkness begins to appear. Everything planted in secret begins to sprout, both good and evil. And here's what this means practically for you. Any movement you made recently toward your healing, your purpose, your true identity, any step you took outside the narrative they built about you, that movement was recorded. And it generated a reaction in the spiritual world that is exactly what is causing the silence you're experiencing. Let me be more specific. There are certain movements that, when a spiritually marked person makes them, literally cause a shock in the surrounding spiritual environment. They aren't grand, dramatic gestures, They are internal, silent decisions that often the person themselves doesn't recognize as turning points. The first movement is the decision to stop defending yourself. You know that moment when you were exhausted trying to explain your side, trying to convince people you weren't what they said you were, trying to prove your worth to those who had decided not to see it. And then, at some point, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe in a moment of prayer, maybe simply from total exhaustion, you stopped. You surrendered. You said, consciously or unconsciously, God, you know the truth. I don't need to fight for this anymore. That is the moment. That is the movement that shakes the spiritual foundations of what was built against you. Because while you defended yourself, the conflict remained on a human level. When you surrendered, the conflict rose to another level, and God operates in ways no human defense can. The second movement is when you began to heal instead of just surviving. There's a huge difference between a person surviving trauma and a person actively healing. Survival is reactive. You're still in defense mode, still managing pain, still defining your life based on what was done against you. Healing is active. You begin to build an identity that exists independent of their narrative. You begin to have dreams that don't involve them. You begin to have whole days where you don't think about what was done. When you make this movement, even if it's small, even if it's just one day of breathing lightly, something rearranges. The anchor that held you to their dynamic begins to loosen, and when that anchor loosens, they feel it, not consciously, but they feel it. The third movement is the most powerful and the most frightening for them, when you began walking in your purpose. Because here's a truth few people talk about regarding dysfunctional families and toxic relationships. Often, the opposition you faced wasn't random, it was directed. The people who attacked you most, who invested the most energy in diminishing you, making you doubt yourself, keeping you small, often they had, on some level they themselves might not consciously recognize, a perception that you had something, a gift, a calling, a capacity they didn't have and that they recognized, even if they refused to admit it. Hatred disguised as concern, jealousy disguised as constructive criticism, sabotage disguised as advice. When you begin walking in your purpose, when the things prophesied about you begin to manifest, when the gift they tried to bury begins to flower, the spiritual shock is immense. Because the entire narrative they built about you, which supported the view they had of themselves as superior, more capable, more blessed, that narrative begins to crumble. And a house of cards, when it starts to fall, falls quickly. Now I need to speak with you about something that might be happening within you at this moment, and that is as important as everything I've said. You might be feeling a mix of emotions that don't seem to make sense together. Relief and guilt, peace and confusion, gratitude and sadness. You might feel good about their silence, and at the same time wonder if you should do something, reach out, try to fix what was broken. Let me tell you something clearly and with love. Don't confuse compassion with returning to a cycle that will destroy you. Genuine compassion, the kind that comes from God, the kind that is healthy, lets you wish someone well without placing your sanity, health, and purpose on the altar of the relationship. You can pray for them. You can wish they find the healing they need. You can forgive them. And forgiveness here doesn't mean automatic reconciliation. It means you won't carry their poison inside you. But you are not responsible for the process of conviction God is doing in their lives. That's not your job. That's a work between them and the Creator. And if you get in the middle, interrupting the process due to anxiety, codependency, fear that the silence means something bad, you will delay not only their healing, but your own. The silence you're hearing is sacred. Let it do the work it needs to do. Now let me tell you about what you should do in this specific period, especially on this March 20th, which represents this portal of transition. The first thing is, Protect your peace as if it were your greatest wealth, because it is. The peace you're beginning to feel, that seems strange after so long in war, that makes your eyes well up without knowing why. That peace is a gift. It's the sign that healing is working. It's the sign that the boundaries you established are correct. Care for it. Don't trade it for a conversation that will destabilize you, for an attempt to gain recognition from someone who will never give it, for a premature reconnection that will throw you back into the cycle. The second thing is, start acting as someone who has already been restored, even if the restoration isn't fully visible in the physical world yet. This isn't pretending. This is active faith. When you begin making decisions from a restored identity instead of a wounded identity, you attract different results, different opportunities, different people. The spiritual world responds to the identity you assume, not the identity the world tried to impose on you. The third thing, and this is the most counterintuitive, instead of focusing on what's happening with them, focus on what's awakening within you. Because the true gift of this period isn't the conviction coming upon them, it's the clarity coming upon you. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about where you're going. Clarity about the relationships that truly nurture you. Clarity about the calling they tried to suffocate. Let that clarity grow, water it, protect it, because from it, the next phase of your life will be built. There's still a fourth element I need to bring at this moment, and it's about what happens within you when you begin to detach from a narrative built about you for years on end. When you spent so much time being defined by someone, being called dramatic, too sensitive, ungrateful, problematic, your mind creates a filter that makes you see the world through the lens of what they said you were. You begin interpreting neutral situations as threats. You begin expecting rejection even where there is none. You begin preparing for pain before it arrives, because you learned it always arrives. This has a clinical name, hypervigilance, and it deeply affects a person's ability to receive genuine love when it finally appears. Because when someone arrives with true intention, real presence, no hidden agenda, the part of you trained by trauma looks at that person and thinks, what's wrong here? This is too good. This person will hurt me. And then you begin to sabotage before being sabotaged, because at least then you have control over the pain. Do you recognize this in yourself? You don't need to answer aloud, but if you do, I need you to hear what I'll say now with all the attention you have. Hypervigilance isn't weakness, it's an intelligent response of your nervous system to an environment that was genuinely dangerous. You didn't create this pattern because you're weak or sick. You created it because your brain was trying to protect you, and it did so for years, as best it could. But now the environment has changed, or is changing. And the nervous system doesn't know that yet. It's still in war mode even though the war has ended. Like a soldier who didn't get the notice that a ceasefire was declared. Healing this specific layer doesn't happen by willpower. It happens through what trauma experts call corrective experiences, repeated moments of safety that gradually teach the nervous system it's no longer necessary to be on maximum alert. These moments can come from safe relationships, consistent spiritual practices, therapy, healthy communities, and they also come from an inner process of grieving, truly, without shortcuts, what was taken from you. Because one of the most dangerous traps for chosen ones is jumping straight to gratitude without first grieving the loss of a childhood that should have been safe, the loss of relationships that should have nurtured you, the loss of the years you shrunk yourself to fit into spaces that were never yours, the loss of the version of you that could have flourished sooner had you had the support you deserved. This grief is legitimate. God doesn't ask you to pretend it didn't hurt. The Bible is full of people who grieved. David in the Psalms, Job in his suffering, Jesus himself in Gethsemane. Grief isn't a lack of faith. Grief is the honest expression of a soul being healed seriously, not superficially. Cry if you need to. Feel the pain without trying to resolve it prematurely. And then, when the crying passes, and it will pass, lift your head and look at the horizon. Because what's coming your way is incomparable to what stayed behind. Let me share a story with you. I won't give a name for privacy, but this story represents the reality of hundreds of people who have been exactly where you are. A woman from Atlanta, 42 years old, spent over 2 decades being the family scapegoat. It was always her who was wrong. Always her who exaggerated. Always her who couldn't take criticism. When she got married, the family said the marriage wouldn't last. When she started a small business, they said she wasn't capable. When she went through a crisis, instead of support, she got a "we knew it would go wrong." At a certain point, exhausted, she made a silent decision. She stopped seeking approval. No drama, no farewell message. She simply stopped putting energy into it. She focused on the business, therapy, spirituality, building a life that made sense to her. 2 years later, the business had tripled. The marriage they said would fail was stronger than ever. And the family, the same family, began to appear with a different narrative. First with silence, then with cautious questions, then with reluctant recognition. Some apologized, others never did. But the way they treated her had completely changed. She told me something I never forgot. I didn't need to fight, I needed to grow. And when I grew, the battle resolved itself. That is what is available to you now. And let me tell you one more thing about March 20th and what it represents energetically for the chosen ones. In many prayer traditions, especially in contemplative Christian practices, charismatic evangelical traditions, and various spiritual lineages, the period of the equinox is recognized as a time of powerful intercession, where the prayers you launched in periods of darkness begin to find answer in the period of growing light. It's as if the spiritual winter, that period where everything seemed stagnant, where prayers seemed to hit a ceiling, where you planted and saw nothing grow, is giving way to spring. The seeds you planted in tears, the prayers in the midnight hour, the moments of surrender when you had no strength to hold on alone, the fasts, the declarations of faith, even when everything around contradicted that faith, those seeds are germinating now. And germination, before appearing above ground, happens beneath it, invisible, silent but real. What you're experiencing, this silence, this strange quiet around you, this feeling that something is rearranging, is the sound of spiritual germination. On both sides. On their side, conviction, discomfort, reality arriving in ways they cannot control. On your side, liberation, clarity, the beginning of a new season that will make everything you went through make sense. Before reaching the end of this message, I need to ask you a direct question. What will you do with this new season? Because here is the real danger for chosen ones. Sometimes, after so long in battle, in defense, in survival, the person doesn't know how to live in peace. The silence becomes uncomfortable. The absence of conflict seems Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.